Some men and some women don't ignore their physical pain or mental exhaustion because they are strong. They ignore it because toughing it out is the only emotional instruction they were ever given. And we all know how that feels. You just swallow the stress, nod when people ask, "How are you?" and pretend you're not running on fumes. From the outside, it looks like you're the reliable guy, the rock, the one who never complains. But a lot of the time, that isn't what's happening at all. You're not being strong. You're just enduring a slow motion collapse. And the weight of that performance is quietly destroying you. For years, I genuinely thought I was managing. I'd go to work, pay the bills, fix things around the house, and just keep moving. And I guess society really praises that. We get rewarded for being the guy who doesn't make a fuss. But the internal reality is so much heavier. It's the chest tightness that you just put down every time you get in your car. It's the constant low-grade dread when you wake up and realize you have to do it all over again. It's the brain fog that makes it hard to even remember what you did yesterday. It's carrying an invisible anvil everywhere you go and just pretending your knees aren't buckling. I read recently that something like 65% of men avoid going to the doctor for as long as possible. 65%. Like, we literally ignore radiating chest pain just to avoid losing our man card and admitting that something is wrong. There was a time when I was having heart palpitations every single night. And instead of telling anyone, I just lay there in the dark, Googling symptoms and hoping I wouldn't wake up dead. Because admitting I was terrified felt worse than the actual danger. When you suppress everything like that, your nervous system gets totally overloaded. But you keep going because you think that's what you're supposed to do. You think if you just grit your teeth and absorb enough stress, you'll earn your place in the world. But it doesn't make you bulletproof. It just makes you hollow. And the hard thing to admit is that for a while, toughing it out actually works. It gives you this illusion of functioning. It gives you relief. Relief from having to be vulnerable. Relief from having to explain your messy internal world to anyone. Relief from the risk of people looking at you differently if they knew how close to the edge you actually were. But the problem is, what starts as a way to protect yourself slowly turns into a trap. Because you can't selectively numb your nervous system. It's not possible. If you numb the anxiety, the fear, and sadness, you also numb the joy, the connection, and the excitement. About 2 years ago, I had a severe crash. 6 months of severe panic and total collapse. I couldn't even leave my apartment to go to the shop. And the weirdest part was, I completely lost my libido for over a year. I found out later that chronic stress actually dumps so much cortisol into your system that it directly competes with your testosterone. Your body is basically in survival mode, entering this dorsal vagal shutdown, so it just turns off everything that isn't essential for staying alive. And when you've spent your whole life swallowing your feelings, you eventually look around and realize life has gotten incredibly small. I saw this stat that in 1990, only 3% of men reported having no close friends at all. Now it's 15%. That's a massive jump. Almost 30% of men under 30 now report having no close friends at all. You spend decades pretending you don't need anyone. You stop calling people because you don't want to be a burden. You text instead of call, which doesn't even give you the biological stress relief of hearing a human voice. And then one day, you desperately need someone. And there is no one to actually talk to. You've isolated yourself so perfectly that you're totally alone. And that's when the shame really hits you. Because Society doesn't know what to do when the reliable guy finally stops functioning. You spent years creating this environment where everyone expects you to be fine, almost like an eggshell effect where people just tiptoe around your quiet moods. So when you crash, people get confused, they pull away, and you start internalizing that distance. You start thinking, I should be able to handle this. I've always handled this. And it snowballs. You don't just feel burnt out anymore. Deep down, you start feeling like you're failing at being a man, like you're failing at being an adult. I've had days where I couldn't even manage to reply to a simple text message, and the guilt was just absolutely through the roof. I'd sit on the sofa looking at my phone, thinking about how pathetic I was that I couldn't even type out 4 words. Admitting you need help almost feels like admitting a crime, like you've broken the one rule you were given. And then you look around at other men who still seem to be successfully toughing it out. You see them going to work, raising kids, doing the things, and you think you're the only one who is drowning. You see the social media posts of guys doing ice baths and claiming they've conquered their minds, and it makes you feel even smaller. But the truth is, a lot of them are just at an earlier stage of the exact same spiral. They're avoiding the doctor too. 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health. They're walking around with the same tight chest and the same overstimulated brain, just waiting for the day their nervous system finally says, no more. The identity you built to protect yourself, the stoic, quiet guy who never complains, is now the exact cage that's maybe keeping you trapped. When you finally break, it's so easy to look at that crash as a sign of weakness, absolute failure. But I don't think that's true at all. I don't think you're weak. I don't think you're failing. If you are currently staring at the ceiling, wondering why you have nothing left to give, that is not a character flaw. It is a biological inevitability. Your nervous system has been carrying a weight it was never meant to hold alone for far too long. The World Health Organization literally classifies burnout as a medical syndrome resulting from chronic stress. It's not a personality deficit. It physically changes your brain. Chronic stress actually shrinks the hippocampus, which is why you have that terrible brain fog and lack of capacity to remember anything. It weakens the connection between your emotional alarm system and your executive function. Your breakdown, it's not a failure. It is your body violently demanding a new way of living. It's your system rejecting a faulty, broken map that you were handed when you were a kid. You're not broken for crashing. You're exhausted from performing fake strength. You have survived an unbelievable amount of invisible pressure. And if that's where you are, I don't think the answer is to just suddenly drop the armor completely and overshare with everyone you meet. That's too much pressure, and it will probably just trigger your anxiety even more. I think the first step is much, much smaller than that. It's just learning to tolerate a tiny bit of honesty. It's just stopping the lie to yourself. It's finding a middle ground between complete isolation and performing fake strength. If someone asks how you are, maybe you don't say you're terrified, but maybe you just say, actually, I'm really burnt out today. It's allowing for what they call the second ask. When a friend asks if you're sure you're fine, you actually pause instead of instantly saying yes. You don't have to fix the whole trap overnight. You just have to stop pretending the anvil isn't heavy. Because true endurance isn't suffering in silence until your heart gives out or your life shrinks to nothing. True composure is having the quiet courage to admit that toughing it out didn't work, and that it's okay to put the heavy things down.